U4.C6.L3, solving equations with rational, I wrote equations again. Solving equations with rational, just imagine the word coefficients there. And you can spell it from that right there. Here's Miss Benoit.
Hi. All right, we're on lesson 3. And as Mr. Romanovich said, we are going to be solving equations with rational coefficients. By the end, you should be able to say that you can do that, and hopefully be able to do 2 problems like this. What is a rational coefficient? I know you are wondering that right now. Don't remember what that term means maybe. Well, yes, a rational coefficient is a fraction. And we're going to be dealing with fractions. We're going to have to think back to Unit 2 on how we manipulated problems with fractions then. This first example that I'm going to do, we're just going to go through together. 3/4 times x equals 18. All right, Mrs. Purdue did lesson 2 with you, and she said for multiplication and division, you do the opposite operation. So because this is 3/4 times x, we would be dividing both sides to get the variable isolated. As Mr. Romanovich said in the first video, that's our goal, to isolate the variable. So how can we get the variable alone? Well, to get it alone, we have to make its coefficient 1. Do you remember how to make the coefficient 1 with fractions? We have to use something, this is another vocabulary word from Unit 2, starts with an R. We're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, okay? Reciprocal, do you remember what that is? You take the fraction, and what was the numerator becomes the denominator, denominator becomes the numerator. So in 3/4 case, it will be 4/3 is the reciprocal, and we're going to multiply that by the left side of our equation. Draw our wall in there to separate, and then we're going to do 4/3 times the right side of our equation too. Now something else I did to my 18, because I'm working with a fraction, I wanted to make 18 look like a fraction as well, so I put it over 1. And again, that's from Unit 2. You'll notice here that we will get our 1 if you remember our cross simplifying. 4 divided by 4 is 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1. You have to look for all those little ways you can simplify to make the multiplication easier. So we're left on this side with just 1x, or x, whichever you prefer. And then on this side, look for cross simplification. 4 and 1 you can't do anything with, but 3 goes into 18 6 times. So you have 4 times 6, which is 24, and 1 times 1, which is 1. So 1x equals 24. Now, we are going to continue to do our check, just as we did in the 2 previous lessons. So you will start by rewriting the original equation, 3/4 times x equals 18. The second line, you will take what you got for x and substitute that in. So 3/4 times 24 equals 18. I'm going to put that 24 over 1 because I have a fraction times a fraction, and that way it's a little bit easier to look for cross simplification. 3 and 1 you can't, but 4 goes into 24 6 times. 3 times 6 is 18, 1 times 1 is 1, so 18 and 18 match. We're good. All right, let's try a couple more examples, keeping that idea of the reciprocal in mind. We have 1/5 times x equals negative 15. So the first thing we do after drawing our wall is to think about what would we have to multiply 1/5 by to get this to be 1x, to isolate that variable. The reciprocal of 1/5 is 5 over 1. So we're going to do 5 over 1 times 1/5 x. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other to keep it balanced. So we're going to do 5 over 1 times negative 15. And I'm going to put that over 1, fraction and fraction. Okay, over here, we simplify to 1x, or just x, whichever you prefer. And here, we have 5 over 1 times negative 15 over 1. They're both over 1, so there's no simplification that can happen. We just multiply across. 5 times 15, you have to think, or write out the math, it is 75. But we do have one positive and one negative, so you have to remember those integer rules from Unit 1, and that would be a negative 75. All right, let's do our check to see if we're correct. Start with the original equation, 1/5 times x equals negative 15. We're going to take our value for x that we got, negative 75, and plug it in. So 1/5 times negative 75 equals negative 15. I'm going to put that over 1, some multiplying fractions on the left side. Look for cross simplification. 1 and 1 you can't, but 5 goes into 75 15 times, and you have this negative here. So that is negative 15. Worked. All right, we got one more, and this is when you have two fractions going on here. So we have 3/4 times x equals 15/16. Again, our goal is to isolate that variable. So we have to make the coefficient 1. What is the reciprocal of 3/4? 4/3. 4/3 times 3/4 x. What you do on the left side, you have to do on the right side. So we have 4/3 times 15/16. These should cancel out to make 1, which they do, so 1x. And over here, looking at the cross simplification, we kind of have a lot going on. 4 can go into 16 4 times, and 3 can go into 15 5 times. 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 4 is 4. So we get 1x equals 5/4. This time it's an improper fraction. That's okay. You can leave it like that because it will be easier to work with in the check. So let's go ahead and set up that check. Write the original equation, 3/4 times x equals 15/16. Plug in for x, so we have 3/4 times 5/4. Look for cross simplification. 3 and 4, no. 4 and 5, no. So you just have to multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. 3 times 5 is 15. 4 times 4 is 16. There it is. All right. So now we're going to see if you can hit this target with rational coefficients. Can you solve these two problems? We have 2/3 times x equals negative 14. Watch the negative there. And then we have 4/5 times x equals 16/25. Good luck.